Hi, so I came across one of these recently. So clearly an antenna. We've got some sort of plastic moulding with some windings around the back. This connects up to this rather interestingly shaped sort of brass section. There's also another separate one here with sort of various sort of interesting RF voodoo trace patterns on. This is a normal GPS antenna. I think most of you will have seen that and be familiar with it. But also there's this sort of coil effectively formed out of a PCB. It's a thick PCB, probably about 3.5 millimeters or so. And you can see the sort of lines on both sides with through platings to form sort of an inductor in this direction. This is also coupled to this one at the top. So this looks sort of fairly exotic. But actually, you see these every single day, and quite a few of you probably own one of these or something very similar, because if I show you the cover, it might be a bit more obvious what it actually is. It's a fin antenna from a car. Obviously not something you often actually see the inside of. I'll just cover this up just to hide the maker's name, because that would have given the game away. But so quite interesting and exotic technology for what is, on the face of it, fairly simple function, but obviously in the car, you do need to have quite high performance. It's actually made of two separate PCBs. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's just to have different permutations for different product variants. But I would have thought, it would have been cheaper to do this on a single board, unless there's maybe the GPS preamp is on this board, so perhaps it's using a different dielectric. The connector is this sort of 4 sets of coax in a sort of automotive style shell, and there's a 12-volt power connector there. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't sort of put power down one of the one of the coaxes. I think the GPS is powered down the coax. That's very common. This back one, this is for FM, so 88 to 108 FM broadcast. I've also seen another one with a lot more turns. I don't know if perhaps that's for AM. But that's the FM part. This one is for the e-call, like emergency call, which I think uses normal cellular networks. So that's going to be in the probably 1.8 gigahertz or to 2 gigahertz sort of region. And this is for DAB in the UK. That's on about I think about 220 megahertz digital radio broadcast. Now to take this section off, you actually have to unsolder the 2 wires and take this screw out. I'm a little bit surprised they could have come up with a more elegant detail where this just sort of snaps in, possibly even using a spring contact or something to avoid the soldering. It's a little bit odd they're using a screw here. I'm sure they could have done something a bit more elegant for production with that. And that's just retained by these, so this just comes off once it's unsoldered. And this tab from the power connector is also soldered in, which again, as this thing is screwed down, I would have thought they could have done just some sort of spring contact detail here. So just screwing it down would make it contact the PCB. Seems a little bit labour intensive to have to solder that. These PCBs are just joined by this sort of solder blob connection over here, which again, this actually just takes the power from this front board to the rear board. Obviously this is soldered down to a solid cast plate, that's not going to go anywhere, but I'm a bit intrigued as to why this is on 2 separate boards. They are slightly different thicknesses. So you can see here, this is the GPS preamp. There's also an amplifier for the DAB section. And on this side, the cellular just goes through a few matching components directly to the antenna. And all this is for the FM, so there's quite a lot of filtering and amplification going on. So obviously it's a pretty small antenna, so it probably needs a fairly decent amount of amplification to get a good signal. Although obviously on top of the car it's got a nice ground plane, but the actual height of the antenna is fairly minimal. There's actually an op amp there. I think it might be perhaps for biasing. Obviously it's clearly not for the signal to go through. And there's a voltage regulator on there. So I'm just a little bit intrigued as to why this was done on 2 separate boards like this. As you know, I don't normally do sort of consumer tech on this channel. Just something that I'd never seen the inside of, not really given much thought to what was inside these things. But it's surprisingly sort of complex and sophisticated for it's just an aerial. But obviously, it needs quite a lot of engineering to actually get the decent performance with such a small form factor.